And now, Tough Talk with Taros. And here's your host, Paul Taros.
Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest is Chuck Ritchard. He is a businessman, has worked in multiple industries, including aerospace, automotive, and microbiology. He is a former city commissioner for the city of Muskegon and a former city commissioner for the city of Norton Shores. He is a member of the Kraken team with Sidney Powell, a United States Air Force veteran, a constitutionalist, activist, and patriot, and most importantly, a father, husband, and follower of Jesus Christ. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you, guys, for being able to host me tonight.
So, you've been calling for the resignation of Michigan Republican Chairman Ron Weiser for over 200 days. Why is that?
208. The reason is simple. Leadership is about ethics. It's about leadership means to be above the fray, above people. That means you're held to a different standard. If we wanted corrupt people, we could go hire, someone off the street. We could hire a criminal, and we did. That doesn't bode well for any of us to say that we support leadership. If we truly believe we're true Republicans, and we look at the Republican platform, such as either the preamble or the platform, we know that there are two documents that really hold it, that we're held to. And that is, one is the Bible, and the other is the Constitution. So when you introduce me as a Constitutionalist, absolutely, beyond the shadow of a doubt. But the Bible obviously is where it comes from. So with that really is the standards. Because without standards, really, what do we have? So we have Ron Weiser, and we have Michon Maddox as the chair and co-chairs. The very things you do speak of who you are, the character. Well, if you're talking about bribery, or you're talking about bullying, or you're talking about lying, or you talk about all the other things, those don't sound like values that I aspire to. And I don't think our viewers or our Republicans in general aspire to that. So that sounds more democratic to me.
Okay. Well, specifically, what are you referring to regarding Ron Weiser?
Okay. Ron Weiser, going into this, we knew there were some character issues. But the biggest one, and by the way, I was accused of this being a lie, told that this was a lie. And I said, it's not. Believe me, it's not. I had enough evidence where it was. The largest fine in the state of Michigan ever in the Bureau of Election, $200,000 was given to Mr. Weiser. Why? Simply because of bribe. A bribe that gave us Secretary of State Benson. And I don't think we'd have to go very far if we asked a person on the street, do you know who Secretary Benson is and what was she known for? She's known for really creating problems for this state. And Ron Weiser gave that to us. How so? Because he gave $200,000 bribe for Mr. Grott to step away from the Secretary of State's office after Mr. Grott had already applied or was running. So why was that money given? The story that was given initially was that he was doing delegate recruitment. Well, to make it very clear, no other delegate recruitment, no other county chairs, no other district chairs got any money. Why was this singled out? Well, the only thing you could see was that he got Mr. Grott to stand down. So the Secretary of State's office, specifically the Bureau of Elections, said, wait a minute. So they got Mr. Weiser to pay the largest fine ever. So that's it in a nutshell. But one thing you haven't heard is there's another bribe. That is not the only bribe out there. Someone alluded to it, and there's not been much said. And the reason there's not much said is because it's like a club. And what they do in a club is their own business, except when it involves elections. And the other bribe, it's a bribe. He can do what he wants, just like you or I can do anything what we want with our money, as long as it's legal. Well, within that club, they can do that, right? If they want to give someone $81,000, I guess that's okay. And that's what the Bureau of Elections said. But to be honest with you, it's kind of interesting. The fine for an election violation is $1,000. Why did they pay $200,000 as a fine? That's a question I think Mr. Weiser should ask. I can speculate on it, but the whole idea, premise was to get it behind us. Well, why didn't we get it behind us way back when, so we wouldn't spend 208 days right like now and then be focusing on what we should be doing? And a follow-up to that would be, if Mr. Weiser was running for or checking to be an ambassador today, you couldn't pass it. Why? Because one of the tests, if you ever look at it, is on honesty. And I've looked up the rules of or the requirements for being an ambassador, and that's one of the things. That's one of the tests. So that's an issue. So all in all, bribery's not one of my favorite things to do. Bullying's another thing. And Mr. Weiser, it's reported that he had also asked chairman, or the old chairman, basically put a little pressure on her to step down, which is why she did. Why did she not step down but not seek re-election? And that was Laura Cox. And the reason being is, that was told, is that because she would never get any money. The major donors would not give her money. So that's a problem. And, of course, then a bunch of people encouraged Laura Cox to get back into it, hence the letter, hence the issue, and she brought this up. But when she brought up about the bribe, it was a little too late. But I just wanted to, make sure that was clear. And, we're in this together, all of us. And I'm not a negative person. I've offered a number of proposals how to fix this problem, a number of solutions. And I've offered it through different avenues so that they knew I'm just a sniper, if you will. I go out and give solutions. Why? Because that's all I've done. When we talk about problem solving, in particular in the aerospace industry, there's a very methodical way of doing it. I thought basically I'd lay it out for them, and they can either call it their own, that's okay, or they'd not hire me, but have me on board. If they asked me today if I would go out and help them, I would. Even though I'm a big opponent, even though I don't like what they did, the sins of the past are the past. I can't change them, but we can change going forward. So what I would propose is that we stop the sinning. We stop this. We put in place the very methods that I told them how to stop it, and give the assurance back to our delegates, the assurance that we mean business, the assurance to not just our delegates, but to the Democrats that we're coming at them. And we're coming at them with ideas. We're coming back at them with energy, and we're coming back at them strong and together, united. That's what it takes. But I can't do it by myself. I need these guys to recognize the issue and sit down, and we'll lay it out. They know I'm out there. They know they don't like me. They don't like it.
Let's back up a minute. What you're referring to are the $10,000 monthly checks to Stan Grott, and then a final payment of $140,000, which totaled $200,000. That's what you're referring to as a bribe?
It's a question. It was $10,000 per month, and a final of $80 is what I saw. The other part of that was there was also a question.
$1 checks and then a final $140, which was $200,000. He received $200,000. That was reported in a law firm. Laura Cox hired a law firm to investigate this transaction, and that's what was reported in their report.
Not to dispute it, but I think there's probably a document out there that shows. I got to go back and look because it's been a while, but I thought that it was something that showed. It doesn't matter because the final is $200,000, but I thought that the document showed different. But it doesn't matter. The fact is that bribery is bribery, and we just don't really adhere to that. We should not adhere to that, right? So, yeah. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Receiving these payments while he had a full-time job as Shelby Township clerk, I believe.
I don't know when he was elected or when his term, what that term length is. I believe he still is that now. I believe he's also the district chair. Correct, correct, and that's what made this thing so highly unusual. Is that they kept saying it was, and I don't know, we could have brought the contract on and we'd take a look at it, but it was still, regardless, very unusual for this to occur. And you see now the outcome. I mean, this outcome it's deplorable to watch this, what happened.
And I believe Ron Weiser paid that $200,000 personally. I mean, not the $200,000 to Stan Grott. That came out of the Republican administrative account. But
correct.
And I'm not going to use the word fine because the Republican Party, Michigan Republican Party, took great lengths to not call it a fine. They said it wasn't a fine; it was just a settlement to prevent future litigation, I believe.
Yeah, and I think somewhere I saw it quoted as being a fine, but certainly you can call it what you want. But the old adage about what walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, probably is a duck, right? So, yeah, it's a matter of syntax, but I think the act itself was fairly self-explanatory. Yes, there was. There actually is one. And, it's actually, someone just published it again because it was multiple pages. So there was one, which is for months we asked for that contract, and we never saw it. And I think you may have been in attendance that night over at the North Oakland Republican Club where that was actually asked. And we never got it then, and we didn't get it for months. And I don't remember how we got it, but I will provide a copy of it because I do have it.
Okay. Well, I know the law firm that Laura Cox hired to investigate this, that was not produced to them, I do not believe.
I don't believe it was either, and I have the law firm's report as well. Actually, I knew about this whole thing going on for about a year before it was released. And couldn't say anything about it because we didn't have proof, didn't have any elements. So what do, right? You can speculate all you want, but unless the proof's in the pudding, it's pretty hard to convince someone. Once you see it in writing, not too difficult, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's a very unfortunate thing, and I think it's unfortunate in a sense to all of our viewers, everyone, that when we get into these, I don't know what you want to call these contests, but it's really, it's sad because what it's really doing is tearing down the structure, the very fabric. And we try not to. We try our best just to give fact. But sometimes you can't. If someone is just not willing to step up to the plate, what do? I'm open for suggestions, but I don't like being a negative person. I don't like going out there and calling Mr. Weiser out or calling the co-chair out because really we've got better things to do with our time is to produce ideas, to win with ideas and people and do actually leadership, not management. What I get from these guys is more management. Let's get back to leadership, right?
Right.
Grand old party means something to me.
Right. Well, I think going back to that report the law firm produced, I think both Ron Weiser and Stan Grott refused to be interviewed when the law firm was doing their investigation.
I think you're correct on that. I believe that came up, and I believe that's exactly right, that they did not choose to be interviewed. And I don't know. I think that part of it, in all fairness to Mr. Weiser and Mr. Grott, I mean, I'm just going to speculate a little bit, but if I were in the same shoes, what would I do? I would probably say, under advice of the lawyer, I'd probably have to say, I can't speak about it right now. You know what I mean? As much as I'd want to speak about it, I couldn't because not knowing where this was going in terms of legal, right? Because they could have prosecuted him on a number of things, but they didn't. So I think they reached a deal. Okay, they reached a deal. But do you think that stopped them from going forward in these type of activities? Do we really think that this stopped the character? Because there's no this when we have a person that goes to jail, we put them in rehab. We like to think that when we put them in prison or wherever we put them, that there's some type of corrective process. Today, if you were to ask me, would I, if I thought this help, paying this fine helped, I'd tell you probably not. I hate to say that. But because of politics being as it is, and this money flow, it's just going to be open and continue unless we do a couple things. And we can talk about that if you want and later on here.
Well, I think in the report that you referred to, and which I also read, the treasurer Carl Myers was quoted as saying this whole thing doesn't pass the smell test, as far as referring to the transaction between the MIGOP and Stan Grott as far as those payments.
I have to concur with that, because that's one of the things when we look at it, and I think you were at some of the meetings that I certainly attended, that it didn't pass the smell test, not just to Carl Myers, but to just about every average citizen, because it doesn't make sense. Why would you pay for delegate recruitment when you pay nobody else? So that didn't make sense. So everything about it. So why would you pay for someone to step out of a race for someone else to enter the race, unless you knew something about the other person or knew something about that person? Why wouldn't you let the normal process, the normal vote take place? Because isn't this what our problem is today? Isn't this some of the very issues that we're worried about, that our elections are being compromised?
Well, I think
so.
The grassroots here all the time. State party does not pick the candidates. The grassroots selects the candidates. But I think, at least I know that's not true.
I absolutely agree with you. I know that's not true. I'll give you an example. Let's just take the current race right now. Do you think that the races are being equally handled by the MIGOP, or do you think that there are some that might be getting precedence or getting help behind the scenes? I'll give you an example. Take a look at with the Chief Craig, that race. Take a look at the amount of attention he's getting behind the scenes and the amount of help that's getting versus how much help one like Ryan Kelly or some of the others, Chris Scott, or Bob Scott, or any of them, Tudor Dixon. I go through a whole list. They don't have the kind of attention that Chief Craig is getting. Why? I attended the GOP introduction of Chief Craig for the youth back when he first came. No questions were allowed. They came in with a whole entourage of people and two SUVs looking like almost like what the president would arrive in, and then they left. That's special treatment, and I'd be eager to hear who paid for that, how that was done, because that's something you just don't see. I don't care it's a governor. I don't care that he's a chief of police. Why does that have that kind of a feel for it, right? This is our guy. There ain't no doubt. Or we look at what's already being foretold is the Secretary of State race on there, where they're putting up a person, and I won't even mention her name, but again, there's that. They're doing stuff behind the scenes to help certain candidates. In other words, they're ponies. So,
well, do you think the MIGOP is behind Chief Craig, or do you think it's just his organization?
No, the organization's not that strong. Chief Craig wouldn't even answer questions, and that they wouldn't let him answer questions because he doesn't really know the issues, and that's a real thing. If you got a candidate out there that's got an organization, they're gonna push those ideas because first of all, he's new into the realm. When you have a person that's held back, it's kind of like a Joe Biden. Okay, for months months he was held up in the bunker, right? And they wouldn't let him answer it. That wasn't Joe Biden's organization doing that. That was an outside organization. That was the Democratic Party. There's no doubt about it. Well, the same way here. So Chief Craig is being, what's the word? I want to say massaged, treated with kids' gloves, and always supported. Now, it's reported, and I can't prove it because I don't have any documentation, that the chairman brokered a deal about a month and a half, maybe, I forget now, maybe 6 weeks ago, right before they brought the chief out, brokered a deal out of, and I'll report this out there, that he brokered a deal with the chief, but he said that a certain person would be running the campaign. The chief said no, and Mr. Weiser said, that's the deal, take it or leave it, and included money, large sum of money. So, do you think?
And how did you come by this?
About three sources. One even gave me the amount, which I couldn't believe because I'd heard this and never heard the amount, and the amount that I was given was kind of more, but I still think it's not enough. I think it's seed money. If I told you it was $20 million, that's seed money, because what's going to take to win this election is going to be a lot of money, and 20,000 or 20 million is not going to do it. Should it? Absolutely, but it's going to take more, and because of whoever our candidate is going to go up against Gretchen, and there's no doubt she's got the big money behind her, and that's not all Democratic money either, because you know who her father was, you know the connections, and it's a shame that we have to rely on money.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I'm just wondering if our candidate, our nominee for governor, is anybody else other than James Craig, will they get the support and the funding from the MIGOP?
It's a very good question. I guess we'd have to ask that of the MIGOP. But I would say this: if it's James Craig, do I really think that the polls show that he's even close? The answer is no. They, in a way, are playing a card that I'd like to see us not have to play. I'd like us to have a card placed on ability, not based on someone's race or gender or whatever, but based on the fact that they are the best person for the job, that they're the best person with the ideas, the best person that has the personal appeal. But when we're talking about this in money, that's all this is. This is nothing more than like in high school, it's popularity contest, popularity being determined by how much press you can get. And while we're on that, where does this money come from? That's what we ought to be asking, and I'm sure people are. This money comes, there's a lot of corporate money, and corporate money can come in through a number of ways, although they say, oh, no corporate money. But let's talk about what's called 11 account. 11 account is a way that corporations can give money, and it's really not trackable. Also called a 501c4, which is an advocacy fund, which you can also contribute and has some limitations, but they're kind of loose, right? So that's what happens. So this money comes in, and who knows how it's spent? Who even knows whose money it is? That's a good question. So how does an average guy get into that? He doesn't. I mean, if you look at my resume is stronger than anyone running. My resume right now, it will take any of those guys' resumes out of the question. But I would never run because it would bankrupt me. It would take that much money because they would support me. I would require so much money behind me to run against them. It's just the way it is. And I'm sure there are a lot of other good people out there, in particular your area, and I know some of them, but they won't run for the same reason. Sad.
It is. It's very sad. Getting back to the when Ron Weiser was chair and there were payments made to Stan Grott, the 11th Congressional District Committee voted to censure Ron Weiser over those transactions. So, obviously there are Republican organizations that are still upset with what went down.
Right. But it doesn't mean anything. A censure, what does a censure mean, truthfully? If we look at a censure, let's talk about a couple other people, about Peter Meyer and Fred Upton. And we know that a lot of people are upset about that. And yet, the GOP, the MI GOP, which just reported a couple of weeks ago, were giving money to those two individuals. How can that be? How can that be in a primary, giving money to those kind of people? So a censure really doesn't do anything. It doesn't stop a party from giving money. It doesn't stop, it doesn't stop anything. It's like slapping their hands saying, well, what the heck?
Well,
What do they care?
It is because the grassroots are raising their voice, saying, in fact, I believe the 11th Congressional District, I could be wrong, has censured Peter Meyer over his actions with, President Trump.
Yeah, what I was getting at though wasn't that it was wrong. I wasn't really getting at that, because as a grassroots, absolutely, you gotta. I mean, it's like a dad. If a kid does wrong, if you don't do something with it, they're going to do it again. But here's the kicker: so you censure them. What are you doing in terms of corrective action going forth? You have to be able to have some way. If I'm giving money to a candidate and they do these kind of activities that are laid out, you should say it would require either resignation or some kind of a measure, a check and balance, if you will. Our forefathers put forth those checks and balances for a reason. Yet here we are. We're wasting a lot of time and energy out there taking care of something they should have done on their own, right? It should have been, oh, you know what? I screwed up. That should have happened. But they don't. And going forward, I haven't heard any remorse from either of those two candidates. And even though the 11th and others have taken and censored them, there's no remorse.
Well,
So,
not at State Party. You're absolutely right. I think these congressional districts and other organizations are trying to make a point by passing these resolutions, but State Party just isn't listening. And they're going to do what they want to do.
But see, that's not leadership. That means we're not listening to the very, very people. You talk about grassroots, firm believer. But we need to talk to the delegates. The most important people in the Republican Party are the delegates. They're the people that do the work. They're the people that out there enslave. Well, you can say, well, what about the guys that are at the top? Well, I haven't been impressed yet. I haven't seen any really earth-shattering ideas coming out of them, right? So how do you have leadership if you're not even conveying? Well, let me give you an example. I'm a soccer coach for 28 years. If I didn't share my plans and my approach to my players, and I said, okay, go out on the field and win me the game, how successful are we going to be? The answer is not very, because how do I know this guy's doing, that guy's doing? You train, you practice. Well, the same way here. We've got to train our delegates. We've got to teach them. We've got to lead them. Right now, when are they taught anything? You know when they're taught anything? Go vote. When the vote comes up on election time, when they have a convention, county convention and a state convention, that's when delegates are important. Any other time, they don't matter.
Well, but Chuck, I think you have it wrong. You know, maybe as a coach, you want to impart your leadership to the team. But right now, Ron Weiser is treating the MIGOP as his, and we're all just working for him. And he's not listening to the grassroots.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. We're actually on the same plane. I'm just saying is that what should be is that we need to, I don't know if you know much about flattening an organization. Part of my background is and my master's is in organizational development, and the doctorate is almost done in that. One of the things you have to look at is how effective is an organization in its current structure. How would you restructure that to be a mean, lean fighting machine? If we want to take on the Democrats and we want to be effective, then we need to be able to flatten it. We need to be able to take it such that delegate at the bottom can put a message or an idea up to the top in a matter of a day. That's even too long, right? There has to be a better communication, and it has to be two-way. It has to be, as I describe it, bi-directional.
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to have to leave this discussion for another day. I thank you for your time and your wisdom. And
Thank you.
for all those viewing, if you think Ron Weiser should resign, I urge you to call area code 517-487-5413, which is the MIGOP headquarters, and tell them what you think about Ron Weiser and what he's done. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you guys very much so. Appreciate being here.